I kicked out my husband and his innocent female best friend after he moved her in and tried to sleep in her room. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and I've been married to my husband, who's 30, for 4 years now. We tied the knot after dating for 3 years, and for the most part, our relationship has been pretty normal except for one major complication: his friendship with his so-called best friend. He's always referred to her as his childhood bestie. Her name's Fiona, and she used to live next door to him growing up. They were practically joined at the hip. I mean, these two have a history that goes all the way back. They went to the same daycare, started kindergarten together, went through middle and high school side by side, and even ended up at the same college, though they were in different departments. They've been inseparable since they were little kids, and honestly, it's hard to forget that because they never miss a chance to bring it up. The only time they ever went their separate ways was after they landed their jobs, which is actually how I came into the picture and met my husband. Fiona has this thing she says about me being the third woman in his life. First comes his mom, then Fiona herself, and finally me. She tries to make it sound like a joke, but something about the way she says it has always rubbed me the wrong way. Part of me thinks she actually means it. If I'm being completely honest, I've always gotten the feeling she didn't like me. It's like she saw me as a threat from day one. When my husband introduced us back when we were dating, he proudly called her his oldest friend, and I did my best to be friendly. But right off the bat, she started picking at me, commenting on how much makeup I had on, saying there was no need to try and impress her. And that wasn't a one-time thing, either. She kept making snide remarks either about how I dressed, how I did my makeup, or worse, she hit me with those sly, backhanded compliments meant to knock me down a peg. I still remember the day she flat out told me that my husband had a thing for dumb blondes. And yeah, I'm blonde. So I guess by now you've probably got a sense of the kind of woman I'm dealing with here. During our dating phase, I brought up my concerns about Fiona to my husband more than once. I tried to explain that she gave me a bad vibe, but every time, he'd just brush it off. He'd say I'd get used to her, that she was just one of those people who take a while to grow on you. According to him, Fiona didn't sugarcoat anything and could come off too blunt for some women to handle. Looking back, I should have taken it more seriously, the way he kept defending her and putting down other people just to make her seem like some misunderstood saint. But honestly, at the time, it felt like a small price to pay. He checked all the boxes: smart, funny, charming, basically everything I'd ever hoped for in a partner. So I figured I could put up with Fiona if it meant being with someone like him. And to his credit, he never made me feel unloved. He was always sweet and reassuring. Eventually, I started tuning Fiona out. I stopped letting her comments get under my skin. Things actually got a lot easier once she met a guy of her own. She finally stopped coming after me for no reason. 4 years ago, she met this guy named Eddie on a dating app. Within a year, they were engaged. Saying she was head over heels for him would be an understatement. And he seemed to really care for her too. Even with all that love going around, I couldn't help but feel that a year was too soon to really know someone, especially when they hadn't even lived together long. But Fiona and I were never close, so I kept my opinions to myself. I knew better than to poke that bear. Still, I did bring it up to my husband. I figured he might have a better shot at gently suggesting she slow things down. But nope, he just went on about how cute it was that both he and Fiona got engaged around the same time. He even floated the idea of a joint wedding. Yeah, a joint wedding. That idea didn't fly with me. I shut it down fast, saying our styles and visions were too different. Thankfully, Fiona didn't push back on it. She and Eddie got married about a month after us. Everything was fine for a while, until recently. About 5 months ago, Fiona confided in my husband that she'd been trying to get pregnant with Eddie, but it wasn't happening. After 6 months of trying, they decided to get checked out, and unfortunately, it turned out Fiona was infertile. That news took a toll on her marriage. Things started going downhill. They tried marriage counseling, but it didn't help. Eddie ended up filing for divorce, saying he couldn't stay in a relationship where he wouldn't be able to have biological children. He didn't want to waste any more time. Honestly, it was a cruel thing to do, and I really did feel sorry for Fiona. After that, she started showing up at our place way more often. And I let it slide because, clearly, she was in a dark place, and my husband seemed to be the only person she could lean on. I didn't have the heart to be irritated, not when she'd show up in tears and my husband would try his best to comfort her. You can't really be annoyed with someone who's that broken, especially when it's obvious they're still grieving the loss of someone they truly loved. Things got worse when the divorce settlement process started. She had to see Eddie face to face during those sessions, and it only pushed her further into a downward spiral. That's when my husband asked me if Fiona could stay with us for a little while, just until she got back on her feet emotionally. He said she told him that being around us made her feel somewhat normal again. That was about 2 weeks ago. And from the moment she stepped into our house, I regretted saying yes. She nitpicked everything I did, the way I cooked, how I had decorated our home, even the TV shows I liked. But of course, she got a free pass because she was going through so much. According to my husband, we had to cater to her needs because she wasn't in a good place mentally. I told him more than once that if she couldn't appreciate being here, maybe she should go stay with her parents instead. But he kept pleading with me, worried that kicking her out might push her over the edge. I didn't want to carry that kind of guilt if something bad happened, so I stayed quiet. I tried to be the bigger person. But everything changed the day before yesterday. That's when I came home from work and found out that my husband had moved a bunch of his things from our bedroom into the guest room where Fiona had been staying. Turns out, my husband had come home early that day just so he could move his stuff into the guest room. When I walked in from work, he and Fiona were in the middle of hauling his things over there together. I stood there for a second, completely confused, and asked if I could speak to him alone. But he waved it off and said there was no need, I could go ahead and say whatever I wanted in front of Fiona because, according to him, she wouldn't mind. Honestly, that was the first time I'd seen Fiona smile in weeks. She actually looked happy. And that just made me more uneasy. So I asked my husband, straight up, why he was moving into the guest room. And without a shred of hesitation, he told me real casually, like he was talking about the weather, that he was going to be staying with Fiona now. In the same room. I stood there, stunned, trying to make sense of what I just heard. When I finally asked him what in the world was going on, he explained that Fiona had been having panic attacks night after night, and she needed someone there, someone she could rely on when she woke up in a panic, terrified and crying about the divorce. Apparently, he felt it was his job to be that someone. I told him right then and there that this was completely out of line, and there was no way I was going to be okay with this setup. It was insane that he even thought I might be. But then he pulled out that same tired excuse he always used when it came to Fiona, that she was like a sister to him, and I had nothing to worry about. And while he stood there saying that with a straight face, both he and Fiona were smiling at me like everything was just peachy. Like their grins could make this whole thing look reasonable. I was boiling inside. I wanted to scream, to break something, maybe even slap some sense into them, but instead, my anger bubbled up so hot, it flipped into something else entirely. I smiled right back at them. Big, sweet smile. I told them I totally understood where they were coming from and that it was all perfectly fine. My husband actually looked relieved. He even said he knew I'd be cool about it. While they went back to arranging the room like it was some cute little couple's retreat, I walked back to our bedroom and grabbed the house deed. That house? It was mine. A gift from my father when I landed my first real job. My name was the only one on that document. Legally, I owned the place. Once I had the deed in my hands, I walked back into the guest room and asked, with the same fake sweetness, if they were finished unpacking. They both said yes. And that's when I dropped the hammer. I told them it was time to start packing again, because they'd be heading out. They could go play house wherever they wanted, just not under my roof. At first, my husband just stared at me, totally confused. Then I held up the deed and made it crystal clear, this house was mine, and I wasn't going to let either of them stay a second longer after the way they disrespected me. He laughed, like I was joking. But when I didn't laugh along, he changed his tune real fast. He started telling me I was being ridiculous, that I couldn't just throw them out like this. I told him I wasn't just talking about it, I was actively doing it. He could argue all he wanted, but it wasn't going to change a thing. I said I was done with him, done with Fiona, done with this twisted circus they were trying to run in my own home. Then I said something I'd been holding back for far too long. I told them I was tired of Fiona's constant sobbing and her over-the-top drama, and frankly, she was starting to get on my nerves. When I said that, Fiona burst into tears again. And just like clockwork, my husband jumped to defend her. He accused me of always being jealous of Fiona. Said my insecurities were the real problem. And you know what? I didn't even try to deny it. Yeah, I was insecure. But not because of who I was, because of whatever strange, codependent, boundary-crossing thing they had going on. That was never normal. I told them if they couldn't function without each other, maybe they should stop dragging other people into their mess and just be together already. At least then they'd only ruin each other's lives instead of dragging down everyone else's. Things got ugly after that. We had a nasty fight, one of those that leaves you emotionally raw and empty afterward. But in the end, they left. My husband acted all wounded, said I'd insulted him even though he'd done nothing but stay loyal to me. As if that made any of this okay. Fiona didn't stop crying until she was out the door. On her way out, she called me evil and jealous. I didn't say a word back. I had no energy left to argue. I just wanted them gone. I really thought that once they were out, I could finally breathe again. But of course, that peace didn't last long. Suddenly, people who'd never cared enough to ask how things were going between us started texting me, our so-called mutual friends. One by one, they messaged to say I was blowing everything out of proportion. According to them, my husband was just trying to be a supportive friend to Fiona, and instead of appreciating it, I let my jealousy take over. It was obvious he'd put them up to it. Every message had the same tone, the same points, almost like they were reading from a script. I ignored it at first. But then came the barrage from his family. Relatives I barely knew started reaching out, telling me I was cruel, that I had no heart, and that Fiona didn't deserve to be treated like that, especially not when she was already suffering. They told me I never deserved my husband to begin with, that they'd always known I wasn't good enough for him. That deep down, I knew it too, and that's why I felt so threatened by Fiona. I didn't bother replying. It wouldn't have made a difference. They weren't interested in understanding my side, they just cared about defending him and his beloved Fiona. For my own sanity, I blocked everyone. Friends, family, all of them. It was the only way I could think to shut the noise out. I figured I'd made my decision. I was going to file for divorce. But then out of nowhere, my husband messaged me from a different number. He said he still wanted to come back. That he was willing to make things work, as long as I apologized. In that message, he repeated the same line I'd heard 100 times before. Fiona was like the sister he never had. There was nothing romantic between them. I'd been seeing it all wrong. He said he cared about her, sure, but it was a deep, platonic kind of love. The kind you feel for family. And then he added that the thought of living the rest of his life without me, that broke him. He told me that walking out that day had been a mistake, but in the same breath, he said I'd overreacted and completely misunderstood the situation. He wanted me to step back, cool off, and really think things through before I did anything drastic. According to him, he just didn't want me to make a choice I'd end up regretting for the rest of my life. He said he was willing to come back and try to fix things between us, as long as we could both apologize for how we'd handled the situation. That was his idea of compromise. But the thing is, I don't even know how I'm supposed to respond to that. From where I'm standing, I don't think I was being harsh. I think I was being pushed beyond my limits, and I finally snapped. And now I'm stuck, unsure if going through with the divorce is even the right decision anymore. He keeps insisting that Fiona is like a sister to him, and that I've got the wrong idea. But after everything? That message really shook me up. Now I find myself second-guessing it all. Should I really go through with ending this marriage? Or am I just reacting to the pain? Update 1. Looking back, I realize I was completely blind. The feedback I got after sharing my story, especially the comments, really opened my eyes. People called out things I hadn't been able to see clearly because I'd been too deep in it. And the sad truth is, my marriage is over. I should have put a stop to his friendship with Fiona right from the start. It might have led to a breakup back then, sure, but at least I wouldn't be facing a divorce now, all because of her. I honestly don't know how I let him get away with so much. I guess the short answer is, I loved him. And maybe, in some way, I still do. That's probably why I even considered taking him back. He's always had this way with words, smooth, convincing. He could talk his way out of anything, and he knew exactly how to make me feel like I was the problem. Over the years, he slowly chipped away at my confidence, making me believe that their friendship was completely normal and that my discomfort was just some insecurity I needed to get over. It took years of little manipulations, but he eventually got me to believe it, until that night. Until he tried to sleep in the same room with her. That was it. That was my breaking point. My parents have been supportive, thankfully. They think I'm doing the right thing by going through with the divorce. And honestly, I don't see how we could ever come back from this. You can't unsay the things he said. And I don't think he's ever going to end things with Fiona, not for me, not for anyone. It's been a few days now, and I haven't replied to his message. I don't even know where they are. And I don't think I want to know. Whatever the answer is, it won't bring me any peace. This is happening. I've filed for divorce. He'll be served in the next couple of days, and I hope that'll be the beginning of something better for me. I deserve someone who puts me first, not someone who always puts Fiona ahead of me. I was such a fool for hanging on to the hope that he'd ever choose me over her. But now I know he won't. And the best thing I can do is leave while I still can. Thank you to everyone who commented. You don't know how much I needed that reality check. I couldn't see it before, but now I do. And I'm finally doing what I should have done a long time ago. Update 2. So, my husband was served with the divorce papers last week. He's decided not to fight it. You'd think that would be the end of it, that he'd take the hint and leave me alone. But nope. He showed up at the house last night. Said he needed to grab a few things. I let him in because, well, what else could I do? Once he finished packing up, he sat down on the couch and asked if he could talk to me for a bit. I didn't say anything, I just wanted to hear what excuse he had this time. He told me he wouldn't contest the divorce if that's really what I wanted, but he wanted me to know he thought I was making a huge mistake. He said he'd only ever loved me, and it hurt that I could even imagine he'd cheat, especially with Fiona. He went on to explain that he and Fiona were staying with his parents now, and everyone over there was apparently heartbroken that I was giving up over something so trivial. He even mentioned that his mother had wanted to come speak to me in person, but he stopped her, said he respected my space and didn't want to pressure me. And honestly, I couldn't help but laugh inside. This coming from the same man who had every friend and relative he could find text me the moment I kicked him out, telling me I was a monster, that I didn't deserve him, that I was overreacting. So I brought it up. I reminded him of all the messages I got, how his whole circle suddenly decided to tell me I was heartless. And then he had the nerve to claim he wasn't behind any of it. Said they all reached out on their own because they cared. But I'm not stupid. I pulled out my phone and showed him the texts. Same phrasing, same tone, same talking points. It was obvious someone had coached them, and who else would benefit from that kind of pressure campaign except him? So no, I didn't buy the whole "I didn't put them up to it" line. He tried to play it off like he was innocent, but I knew better. And when he realized I wasn't falling for it, he changed tactics. Started going on about how hard the last few days had been for him, knowing our marriage was falling apart. He actually cried right there on the couch. Said life wouldn't be the same without me. That he kept wishing there was anything he could do to fix things between us. Honestly, it felt like a performance. Like he knew nothing was going to change, but still felt the need to go through the motions anyway. I just sat there, watching him cry. And the only thing that came to my mind in that moment, I said it out loud. So I told him calmly, but clearly, that I might reconsider the divorce if he could promise me, right then and there, that he'd never see Fiona again. That caught him completely off guard. He stopped crying immediately, like someone had flipped a switch. Then there was just silence, long, heavy silence, while we both waited for the other to speak. To be perfectly honest, I had no intention of staying with him, no matter how he answered that question. Even if he had promised to cut ties with her, I still wouldn't have taken him back. But I needed to hear what he'd say when he was faced with a clear choice. And of course, he didn't say yes. Instead, he started arguing. Said I was being unfair. Then came the same tired speech I'd heard over and over again every time we fought about Fiona, that she was his oldest friend, like a sister to him, and he couldn't just abandon her. Especially now, when she was going through such a hard time. According to him, that would have been heartless. But somehow, it was perfectly okay for him to walk out on me, his wife. The person he'd made vows to. That part never seemed to matter. I let him go on for a minute or two, listing out every excuse in the book. Then I cut him off. I told him this exact moment was the reason I was walking away. Because when he was given a clear choice between saving our marriage or holding on to his friendship with Fiona, he picked her. Just like he always did. So now he couldn't say I hadn't given him a chance. And he definitely couldn't say I was being dramatic. He didn't have much to say after that. No argument, no defense. He just got up and left. Now, it's all in the hands of the legal system. Update 3. It's been a few weeks since that happened. Today, we saw each other again for the first time, at court. Where we're from, there's a 6-month waiting period before the divorce can be finalized, so we've got to wait it out. After the hearing, he walked up to me and said he was willing to wait out those 6 months if that's what it took to win me back. I couldn't believe he was still trying. I hadn't seen him, hadn't talked to him in weeks. And honestly, I didn't think there was anything left for us to say to each other. But there he was, still holding on to the idea that we could fix this. So I asked him one simple question: are you still living with Fiona? He didn't answer. We just stood there in silence for a minute. I rolled my eyes and turned to leave, but before I got into my car, he blurted out that Fiona couldn't go back to her parents' place. Apparently, her mom was impossible to live with and blamed Fiona for the divorce because she was the one who couldn't have children. That's why she moved in with us. Then, after I kicked them out, she ended up staying with his parents. And you know what? I know I was supposed to feel bad for her. I really do. But I couldn't bring myself to care anymore. Not after everything she'd put me through. Not after how she made me feel small and unwanted in my own home. She was the reason my marriage had crumbled, whether my husband wanted to admit it or not. I told him, from inside the car, that Fiona had other friends, single ones, who would have gladly taken her in. She didn't need to come live with us. The truth is, he just wasn't willing to admit how weird and inappropriate their relationship had always been. And that's what cost him our marriage. We argued about it for a bit, right before I left. And that whole fight just reminded me all over again how foolish I'd been to even think about giving him another chance. I mean, I gave up so much for this relationship, friends, peace of mind, and now, a lot of money too, because Fiona lived with us rent-free and now I've got to pay a lawyer. It blows my mind that I overlooked so much just because I loved him. But the truth is, he didn't love me enough. Not even enough to say, yeah, maybe moving Fiona in wasn't the best idea. He's always been so stubborn when it came to her. And honestly, I think it's good we're getting divorced. Now he can finally be with the woman he's always prioritized and stop wasting my time. I just hope he figures it out soon and quits chasing me around like this. Update 4. So, something wild happened. And I still can't wrap my head around it. I hadn't heard from my husband in a few days, which I figured was a good thing. I thought we were finally moving on. But yesterday, he showed up at my place unannounced, ringing the doorbell like a man possessed. When I opened the door, he didn't wait for me to say anything. He just stormed in. At first, I thought he'd come to pick another fight, and I was 2 seconds away from calling the cops to have him removed. But then he started crying. Again. Only this time, it felt real. Not performative like before. And no matter how mad I was, I'm still human. I can't just sit there and watch someone cry without at least offering a tissue. So I sat him down. Waited for him to talk. He told me he'd taken the day off because he was spiraling, depressed about the divorce, sitting alone in his room. Then Fiona came in to comfort him, but instead, she started flirting. At first, he thought she was joking and told her to cut it out. But then she tried to cuddle with him and that's when it clicked. That's when he realized I had been right all along. He said he never once thought of her as anything more than a friend, maybe even like a sister. But apparently, she hadn't felt the same. She'd been waiting, all these years, hoping for something more. When he shut her down, they got into a huge fight. She told him he'd led her on for years, called him a cheater, and then packed up her things and went back to her parents' house. And now here he was standing in front of me, finally admitting that I'd been right. About everything. He said he was sorry. Said he took me for granted. Said he didn't deserve me, and that maybe this divorce would help him get his head on straight. We talked for a bit after that. No fighting, no yelling. Just clearing the air. I could tell he meant it when he said he'd only ever loved me. That he'd really seen Fiona as a sister. It wasn't enough to make me stay. Not after everything that's happened. But it did help me feel a little less bitter. A little more at peace with the decisions I've made. The divorce is still happening. But now, we're going to try to end things on good terms. And honestly, I hope it stays that way.